The room was quiet. Rows of chairs sat bolted to the floor beneath fluorescent lights, their occupants rigid and expectant. Among them, seasoned agents, profilers, investigators still in training, people who had seen a great deal and believed they understood violence. None of them were prepared for what came next. At the front of the room, a tape recorder waits. No briefing, no intro, just a simple instruction: to listen. And when the tape begins to play, it doesn't sound like fiction. What fills the room is human terror, recorded in real time during the final moments of a young girl's life. Some agents stare straight ahead. Others lower their eyes. A few stand and pace. This recording is used as a lesson, a reminder of how far cruelty can go and how ordinary the men behind it once appeared. The voices on that tape belong to two men who blended in, who drove familiar roads, hunted in plain sight, used a van as a mobile chamber of torture, carrying tools not for work, but for pain. What they were hearing in that room was not the beginning of their story. It was the end. And to understand how it ever came to this, how such suffering was planned, rehearsed and recorded, we have to rewind. Before the tape, before the van, back to two men whose partnership would ultimately lead to one of the most disturbing killing sprees in American history. This is the story of the Toolbox Killers. To those who knew them, they were unremarkable. They became something else, monsters, only in the moments their victims realised there was no way out. How were two men able to abduct, torture and murder multiple young women across Southern California while leaving almost no physical evidence? What patterns emerged across the disappearances that initially went unnoticed and later revealed a level of consistency that was deeply unsettling? Why did domination and prolonged terror become central to their identity rather than simply a means to kill? And when did this case cross from solvable investigation into a psychological endurance test for everyone involved?
Hello and welcome to I Could Murder, a podcast. We are back again with a brand new case in the darkest series we've ever done, and I'm joined by Benny Carter and producer Dan. How you doing, Ben?
Good morning. Doing very well. Thank you very much for having me. I'm actually scared about today. I'll be completely honest. I'm scared. I don't want to do this. Dan, over to you.
Hello boys, hope you're both doing well. Happy to be here. Yeah, I'm a bit scared too. But before we get into the nitty gritty, if you don't mind boys, can I say a big hello and welcome to all our bloody new subscribers and followers and listeners. We've had an influx of people discover the show. Yes, and if you're new, please say hello, because we read all the comments. We want to say hello to everybody. Glad you're enjoying the show. Sorry to those who aren't enjoying the show as well. But no, thanks very much. Thanks for the support. It doesn't go unnoticed.
Very well said, Dan. Yeah, welcome to anyone new. Lovely to have you. And if you are one of the people that's just shut up and get on with it, well, just practice patience a little bit more. But yes, today's case is a dark one, like Ben said. It's been a... before we start, actually, I want to say no relation.
Yes.
Yeah. And also rest in peace to Chuck.
Oh, wow, yeah. Double whammy.
Of course, 86.
That is a good innings, even for someone with extra superpowers.
Well, that fighting he's been doing, Ben.
Exactly, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Oof. So, yeah, Chuck Norris. I mean, I'd just be fair, I haven't done my due diligence there. I don't know if there was any controversies surrounding Chuck Norris.
Quick Google.
Chuck Norris, problematic, ?
This would surprise me. He seems to be universally loved. But that you you do get some shockers sometimes.
Why politics may overshadow his legacy. Okay, we won't get into it. But still, rest in peace to Chuck Norris.
All right, quick one before we get back into it. As the producer of this operation, my job is to basically keep everything on track, more or less, which with Tom going off on his tangents all the time and Ben disappearing off into the darkest corners of the internet, can be quite a challenge. So I need something that actually keeps me switched on. And that's where Holy comes in. I've been using that energy range during recordings, during prep, and it's just steady. No crashes, no jitters. It's just a clean boost that actually lasts. It uses this new CAF thing, so you get a proper longer release rather than a spike and a drop. And the big one for me, 0 sugar, but it still tastes amazing. Proper fruit flavours, not that artificial kind. It's also less than £1 per serving, which is ideal. Now, Ben has developed a serious attachment to their hydration range. I'm talking electrolytes, coconut water, the lot. He's basically turned into a walking advertisement for staying hydrated. But to be fair, it's actually really good, especially when you're trying to stay focused without overdoing the caffeine. They've also got iced teas made with real tea, even milkshakes with vitamins in. So there's a bit of everything for everyone, depending on what you're after. If you want to give it a go, we've got a couple of codes for you. ICMAP5 gets you £5 off your first order, and ICMAP gets you 10% off after that. Links in the description somewhere. Just be careful, you might end up like Ben, a bit watery. But please consider it. It really helps out that podcast more than you know. The support is fantastic. We genuinely love Holy. Give it a go.
But yes, Ben, you said it already. This is a very disturbing case, but can you introduce what the case is today?
I can indeed. So this week we are here to discuss, at long last, this has been requested for a while, the Toolbox Killers, also referred to as the torture chamber on wheels. The crimes of Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris, and the Scream for Me cassette tapes. Yeah, well, this is the first time there's a piece of content associated with this case, and how long have we been doing this? Nearly 6 years doing the pod?
Just about.
We've seen and heard some awful things. There's a piece of audio that I just cannot bring myself to listen to. That is very infamous for this case, but I'm even nervous even talking about it. But to give you some reassurance, Tom, we're just going to go with Roy throughout the episode, just so there's no confusion, because I was getting confused.
I could see you putting Nozza in there.
Yeah, Nori.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, let's not do that. Yeah, just Roy.
Just Roy.
This is one of those rare cases where it is a duo killers. Obviously, there's the infamous Myra Hindley and Ian Brady, but when it comes to the same sex duo killers, we did cover Leonard Lake and Charles Ng recently, but it is very rare to find two of the same sex killers. And this case, it's definitely made the series for a reason, let's just say. Very disturbing case. One of the lawyers involved in the court case of this, he was involved in the Manson case, and he said, whenever he gets asked which case is the most disturbing he's ever covered, he says this case is the one that stays with him. So, yeah, it's going to be a journey, guys, but come on board and we'll get through this together.
Let's do it. I'm genuinely nervous. This one, don't like this one. Not that I like the other ones. Don't bet any. Okay.
Inside one of the Federal Bureau of Investigation training rooms, this case isn't taught as a partnership. It's a lesson in imbalance. One man dominant, calculating and hungry for control, the other man compliant, deeply unstable and eager to belong. Understanding the crimes means starting with that dynamic. So the focus for this week's episode begins with Roy Norris, the follower whose instability created space for something far worse. So we're going to start today's case by going into a bit of background about Roy Norris and then go into how he met Lawrence Bittaker.
Roy Lewis Norris was born on the 5th of February 1948 in the city of Greeley, Colorado. He was the eldest of 2 children born to a young working-class couple, having a younger sister who, along with their parents, has not been publicly named. Shortly after Roy was born, his parents made the decision to get married, not for love, but to hide a truth that society of the time simply would not forgive. And this was that he was an unexpected arrival and had been born out of wedlock. His father, who is again unnamed, worked 6 days a week as a labourer at a local scrapyard, whilst his mother, who was already struggling with a shadowy dependence on drugs, and the origins and timing of which remain unclear. There's some speculation that she took various drugs whilst pregnant with Roy, and obviously that would go on to explain some of the issues that he encountered later in life. The Norris family home became one fractured by secrecy, instability, neglect, and unpredictability. As an infant, he was diagnosed as being long-sighted, and as a result, he had to wear thick, heavy glasses from a very young age. A small detail that made him stand out, and one that the others never let him forget.
Sorry, so I'm trying to find some glasses or something.
I literally was.
I can see your eyes light up.
Cut back to me.
What was... We had him the other week. Robert Bittaker, was he short-sighted or long-sighted?
The Norris family was
another
fractured.
long-sighted person. I don't know if that's more rare than short-sighted people, but I'm sure Robert Bittaker was long-sighted as well. Because Tom did a bit about him reading menus from miles away.
I always felt like, as a kid, long-sighted was cooler.
Yeah, superpower.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Short-sighted is, yeah. I don't know.
Which sort are you? Long or short? You get really nervous. Long.
No, honestly.
Read this. We're not advocating bullying.
No.
During his early years, as a result of his mother's struggles, Roy regularly drifted between the family home and a series of foster families scattered across Colorado, whilst also staying temporarily with various extended family members. His grandfather owned a prominent real estate development company in the city, and this meant that much of the Norris family lived nearby. However, any memories that Roy had of his childhood quickly become very murky. They alternate between wrongful accusations of being physically abused by his parents and several other allegations of neglect and sexual abuse during his time in foster care. Periods where he claims that he was denied food, not provided with adequate clothing, and even the simplest sense of safety. In one particular foster home, he later claimed that he was routinely sexually abused by an elderly Hispanic couple, and from that experience, he said, came a lasting prejudice towards Hispanic people in general. And again, all of this is according to Roy's account of his childhood, so you can believe it or you can choose not to believe it. In his early years, he also started feeling abandonment issues towards his parents and would blame them for any of the abuse or neglect he is believed to have endured. There are very few in-depth reports on his childhood, but according to a review conducted by the Department of Psychology at Radford University, Roy was regularly bullied and or mocked during his time at school, though it is unclear exactly why. This may have partly influenced his decision to drop out of school as a teenager and eventually enlist in the US Navy. When Roy was just 16 years old, a significant incident occurred between him and several members of the wider Norris family. This part comes from official accounts rather than Roy's recollections, and it's not a good look at all. So after spending a few weeks back living with his parents, he visited what is believed to have been the home of one of his aunts and uncles. Here, he approached one of his female cousins, who was in her early 20s, and immediately began speaking to her in a sexually suggestive, sexually violent manner. The young lady began shouting at him and informing other family members of what was going on, and they eventually ordered him to leave the property. Word quickly travelled back to his father before Roy was able to get home, and his father then threatened to subject him to a severe beating due to how he behaved and the embarrassment he had caused. Within a matter of seconds, Roy somehow managed to move past his father, grab his car keys, and subsequently steal his car. From here, he drove approximately an hour and a half into the darkness of the Rocky Mountains. He then parked up, got outside the vehicle, and attempted to end his life by injecting pure air into an artery in his arm. Now that last part, driving to the Rockies and injecting pure air into his arm, that is his account, but all the stuff involving his cousin is according to family members. But that is a heck of a series of events.
Yeah, if that's true, I mean, injecting yourself with pure air in an artery is a very, what I imagine, painful way to pick if you're looking to end your life in that manner. It's horrific. What a chain of events. I mean, as Ben said, this is seasoned with Roy's own Roy's Recollections, which sounds like a radio show of an old touring
Hits from the
country
80s.
singer.
Jingle, get a jingle out.
Life on the road, it was different back then. Roy's Recollections. Do you want me to sign that? That could be as innocent as you want it to be.
Oh,
But yeah, that's that is brutal. If true.
So whether or not this happened, this method did not achieve the desired result, and he was later apprehended by the police, who returned him to the family home. Not long after this, his parents sat him and his younger sister down and informed them both bluntly that they were unintentional and unwanted children, and that they would both be free to leave the family home once they reached adolescence. And yeah, that itself is an absolutely heartbreaking situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think in regards to, your parent, your son's been, apprehended by the police, and you think, you know what, I'm going to say this to him, and this will get him on the straight and narrow. If there was a very rogue decision there, I mean, telling any child they're unintentional and unwanted is not going to lead to anything good, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, this, like you just said, this so far this is covered with instability, violence, abuse, neglect. It's all over the place. And we've only just started.
Yes. We're only a couple pages in, and it's already setting for a bleak foundation for someone to go and live their life. Which obviously this gets bleaker and bleaker. This case, yeah, I feel a little bit conflicted because I don't really want to give Roy any sympathy, but you can see from his childhood, it's been heartbreaking with some of the moments in there. But obviously, again, like we always say, lots of people have heartbreaking childhoods, have horrible things happen to them, and they go on to live positive, good lives. And but other people, things stick with them, and they take that into later life, and they act out on those things in horrible, horrible ways. And that's the path that Roy went down. But yeah, it's obviously not an easy childhood, and not a family setting you'd want anyone to grow up in.
So on top of this, the parents explained to each of their children that they would be getting divorced the moment that both of them left the family home. And so yeah, by the time Roy had finally reached adolescence, his childhood had offered him very little but survival. Hunger, fear, neglect, abuse, abandonment and instability had already shaped him long before the world would ever see the darkness he would come to unleash.
The following year, Roy enlisted in the US Navy and was initially stationed over in San Diego. 4 years passed there with little to mark them. Quiet, unremarkable, almost as if he was simply biding his time and trying to get away from his family. In 1969, he was deployed for a 4-month tour in Vietnam. Though he never saw active combat, it's alleged he may have experienced significant mental and emotional trauma. After that single tour, he was honourably discharged from the Navy and returned to America. Just after a few weeks, his life took an incredibly drastic and incredibly sinister turn. In November of 1969, now 21 years old, Roy was arrested for his first known sexual offences, though it's speculated that some may have occurred beforehand. He was charged with both rape and assault with intent to commit rape. In one of those highly concerning incidents, he had tried to force his way into the car of a lone woman who was parked up near a wooded area in downtown San Diego. He grabbed and scratched at her through an open window, making verbal threats towards her about what he was going to do with her once he got inside. But she was fortunately able to start the car and drive away before any further harm was inflicted. Disturbingly, just 3 months later, in February of 1970, Roy approached the home of a single woman and started knocking at her door, claiming that he needed to use her telephone. When she refused after a few moments of awkward silence, he didn't retreat. Instead, he tried to break in, even trying to force his way through a rear window after she had locked her front door. The police arrived within a few minutes and stopped him. It was a moment that showed how quickly his polite pretense could turn into a violent and deeply disturbing intent. I mean, just there, boys, the arrogance and the confidence to try and barge his way in, and be denied at first, but then still try and get through the window. That's just huge red flag.
Yeah, and this seems to be a huge bit of escalation, not only from the childhood incident with his older cousin, but now that he's out of his parents' roof, he's had spent some time in the Navy, he seems to feel like he can do whatever he wants, wherever he wants, and that is a terrifying thought when he's not aware of the consequences of his actions at this stage either. And it's only going to get progressively worse. As well, both of them, they do kind of, especially in the era of their crimes, they both look relatively, which is often the case when we cover cases like this, but they don't look very threatening. They look particularly Bittaker when we get onto him, like very small man,
Weedy little guy.
I guess Roy Norris looks the slightly more intimidating one of the two, but the fact he was doing this on his own before he'd even met Bittaker and trying to get away with things like this is a terrifying thought.
Less than 3 months after this, after several concerns had been raised locally, military psychologists diagnosed him with schizoid personality disorder, and Roy received an administrative discharge from the Navy under terms simply labelled as psychological problems. On bail and unchecked, his violence continued to escalate. In May of 1970, again late at night, he attacked a female student he had been stalking for several hours on the campus of San Diego State University, striking her on the back of the head with a rock until she slumped to her knees, then repeatedly bashing her head against a concrete pavement as he knelt on her lower back.
Yeah, that is just so visceral. I don't know if that's the right word. Just caveman-esque.
Despite severe injuries being caused, she survived, and it's because she survived that Roy was only charged with assault with a deadly weapon and subsequently committed to Escalating State Hospital, where he was classified as a mentally disordered violent sexual offender. After 5 years at the secure hospital, he was released with 5 years probation, declared by doctors treating him as being of no further danger to others. Once again, another 3 months would pass by, and the darkness would return. Late at night, a 27-year-old woman walking home from a restaurant in Redondo Beach declined Roy's offer for a ride on his motorcycle.
Roy Lambert.
In response, he parked the bike, approached her from behind, grabbed her scarf, twisted it around her neck and told her, "I intend to rape you," before violently dragging her into nearby bushes. He informed her that he would strangle her to death if she made any noise or tried to escape. She feared for her life, and therefore she did not resist. Although the crime was reported the next day, the police could not immediately identify him due to how late at night the incident occurred. However, the following month, whilst making the same journey home, the victim spotted Roy's motorcycle once again, noted the license plate, and finally had enough information to pass over to authorities. Convicted of forcible rape a year later, Roy was subsequently sent to California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo, where he met and befriended an individual who would change the trajectory of his life forever. California Men's Colony was no ordinary prison. It was a sprawling institution where hardened criminals and mentally disturbed offenders were confined together, openly. In that very environment, Roy and his new friend discovered that they shared the same sadistic fantasies. They also shared a dark understanding and quietly started making plans that would lead to unthinkable acts of rape, torture, and murder once they were both free.
Almost 1,500 miles away from where Roy was born and raised, Lawrence Sigmund Bittaker entered the world on September 27, 1940, in the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He was an only child born to parents who, just like Roy's, did not truly want him. His birth mother placed him in an orphanage when he was just a few months old, and he was later adopted as an infant, sent into the care of a new family before he could even form a memory of the world. Lawrence's adoptive father, George, worked as an engineer in the aviation industry, a job that kept the family on the move constantly, scattering a young Lawrence around 4 different states and 4 different aircraft factories, before finally settling in California. Whereas Roy Norris' childhood was fractured by neglect, instability, the shadow of a drug-addicted mother, and allegedly a violent father, Lawrence's life carried a different kind of turbulence. Constant relocation, a sense of transience, and a deep simmering resentment towards the biological parents who never made him feel wanted or loved. Despite this, Lawrence displayed a very high intelligence from an early age, reportedly with an IQ of 138, placing him in the 99th percentile. A sharp mind that could calculate, plan and manipulate. Yet one he considered wasted on the boring and mundane nature that he considered school and the American education system to be. By the age of 17, he had dropped out of school, already on the radar of juvenile authorities for multiple instances of petty crime, shoplifting and car theft. Behaviours he later claimed were attempts to compensate for a life devoid of attention and affection. In fact, he had already committed his first crime 5 years earlier, at the age of 12, when he was caught shoplifting at a local supermarket. Where Roy's violence began in adolescence in fits of sexualised impulses and rebellion, Lawrence's offences were methodical, increasingly brazen and diverse. Theft, evasion, hit and runs, interstate car theft, and armed robbery, each brushed with the law, layering him with both experience and street smarts. By the time he was 18, and having just served a several-month sentence at a youth facility, his adoptive parents could no longer tolerate his bad habits or the life of crime that he seemed to be pursuing, so they abruptly disowned him and moved on before he returned home. Again, the confliction of feeling sympathy for anyone who go on to commit what they do, obviously being adopted and feeling the rejection already, acting out on it and then being disowned again, it's going to further, instate the feelings of he's feeling and anger he's feeling against the world, essentially. And obviously with such a bright IQ as well. Yeah, it's easy to see that this is just something that's going to add fuel to the fire that's already burning there.
Yeah, definitely. And also the kind of contrast between him and Roy. Obviously, Roy wasn't the most intelligent. It's kind of like a really, really, really dark Of Mice and Men kind of vibe that I'm getting. But he had a good life for a period of time with the adoptive parents. I know he had to relocate a lot, but they were a well-to-do family by all accounts, lived in nice houses, gave him, love and affection, attention. But he's claiming, obviously, later finding out that he was, placed into the foster system at such a young age, and that sense of rejection and abandonment. Obviously, I could never understand how that feels, but that must be a really difficult thing to think about your parents, not wanting you the moment that you were born. But his crimes now will start to be really much more kind of, I don't want to say intellectual crimes, but he's thinking about how they're not physical, invasive, violent towards women crimes, whereas Roy's all were.
So after his parents had disowned him, he would never see them again. It infuriated him, but it also became a separation that would leave Lawrence untethered, unmonitored, and completely free to test the limits of his intellect up against the world's rules. Rules that he found to be just as boring and pointless as he had found his time at school. From here, he would continually lash out and develop even more hatred towards the world. Lawrence's criminal record over the next decades read as a catalogue of both persistence and dangerous escalation. He cycled in and out of state and federal prisons all over the country, from the California Youth Authority all the way to the Oklahoma State Reformatory, and even a brief stint at the Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Missouri. He would later claim that his first sexual experience occurred whilst incarcerated, though he offered no extra details, hinting only at the beginning of a dark curiosity. Repeated evaluations by prison psychiatrists labelled him
a highly manipulative individual, unable to acknowledge the consequences of his actions. He was paranoid, borderline psychotic, very intelligent, and an individual with considerable concealed hostility.
Despite this, Lawrence was prescribed antipsychotic medication and released back into the general public repeatedly. Unlike Roy, whose crimes were primarily sexual assaults escalating in severity, Lawrence's offences ranged from the theft to violent assault, and even attempted murder. This attempted murder, or assault with attempt to commit murder, as it was recorded, occurred in December of 1974, and then 34-year-old Lawrence Bittaker was inside at Ralph's supermarket in Hollywood.
Definitely a jingle there.
Oh, my God.
Welcome to Ralph's. Take a peach.
We sell peach, we sell glue. Welcome to Ralph's supermarket. We don't sell anything else, not here. Just peaches and glue. With very little regard for paying for his purchases, a teenage employee by the name of Gary Louie had been watching him and observed Lawrence slip a steak into his jacket pocket before calmly leaving the store. I can't think of any different kinds of steak there is. Sirloin.
Ribeye.
Rump fillet.
Rib.
T-bone.
The young man followed him out into the car park and asked if he had forgotten to pay for something, which is quite a sassy way of stopping a shoplifter, I think.
Yeah, arms folded, tapping his foot on the floor. Have you forgotten to pay something?
Like Sonic at the end of a level, and he's going like that. And you're like, "Oh, you arrogant bastard! You've completed it. Just enjoy the victory." Yeah. But you forgotten to pay for something. Lawrence turned around, stared at him, pulled out a knife, and he doesn't go on to eat the steak here. Yeah, he says, without saying a single word, drove it straight into the young man's chest. All for a steak as well, which just goes to show how little he respected life. And yeah, he missed Louis' heart by a matter of millimeters. Lawrence then attempted to flee the area, but was quickly apprehended by 2 employees before police arrived at the scene. Fair play to those employees after seeing that happen to a colleague and then going out there.
Yeah, that is... didn't say a word, just turned around, pulled the knife out. done. It's and for the police response, quite quick as well. They're able to apprehend him and get there quite quickly. But yeah, that is terrifying that he would do that for a steak.
Well, Ralph's dad was a chief policeman, so...
Was he?
Yeah.
Not Clancy, was it?
We said it wrong last week, wasn't it?
Quincy.
Yeah, Quincy.
Quincy. Oh, I don't know if that made it, and it probably did.
The young man fortunately survived the attack, and Lawrence was taken into custody, where he was charged with the lesser of the offences of assault with a deadly weapon and assault with intent to commit murder. He was ultimately sentenced to 5 years at the California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo, a punishment many later considered astonishingly light, given that Bittaker was already a repeat offender with a long criminal history, and had been released from prison just 2 months earlier. It was at the California Men's Colony, among hardened criminals, drug dealers, gang members, and deeply violent offenders, that two paths destined to intersect finally crossed.
Yeah, the other thing I've noticed is they've both got away with really, really terrible crimes and received very short sentences for them. So with Roy Norris, the rape offences, multiple rape offences, trying to break an entry and only getting a 5-year sentence, released early. Then it seems to be every few months they then go back and repeat offend, and there's no extended sentence for either of them because of that. I think both of them got identical sentences, a 5-year sentence at this men's colony and repeatedly released back into the public, no problem. I don't know.
5 years for intent to commit murder is nutty.
Yeah.
Especially with all his priors as well, like dozens and dozens of previous offences. But yeah, I mean, it would be now in this environment that these two men would finally meet. At first, their interactions were unremarkable. Roy later recalled that the two first became acquainted with one another after he began teaching Lawrence how to make jewellery in a prison workshop. It's kind of a meet cute in a way.
Yes.
Ish.
Do you ever want to make a bangle? An anklet?
An anklet. What began as casual conversation slowly developed into something closer to a friendship. According to Roy, Lawrence even intervened on at least 2 occasions when other inmates attempted to attack him. Which that also surprises me, because Roy's the sort of bigger, huskier one. He also loved a busk. But Roy's the bigger one of the two, and Lawrence is the one protecting him. Again, that surprises me. Well, either way, this act of bravery on Lawrence's part helped cement a growing sense of loyalty between the pair. And as we've discussed with both of their backgrounds, very, very similar childhoods, very similar resentment towards their biological parents, and lots of sense of rejection from the world. But beneath these seemingly ordinary interactions, much darker conversations were beginning to take shape. By 1978, the two men had discovered that they shared a deeply disturbing fascination with sexual violence and a profound hatred of women specifically. Roy openly admitted that the greatest stimulation for him came from witnessing the fear of young women and girls, something he said had driven much of his long history of sexual offences. Lawrence, who was not known to have committed any sexual crimes prior to meeting Roy, revealed something equally chilling in response. He claimed if he ever raped a woman, he would torture and kill her afterwards, ensuring that there would never be a witness left behind. Whenever the two were alone, these conversations evolved into something far more sinister, as they spoke openly about plans for abducting, assaulting, and murdering teenage girls, or in their words, having some fun together once they were both released from prison. What began as fantasy soon became something much more deliberate. Together, they constructed an elaborate plan. Once free, they would abduct and murder one girl of each teenage year, from the age of 13 through to 19 years old. Before their sentences ended, the two men made a quiet promise to one another. When they were released, they would find each other again, a promise that would soon ignite a partnership capable of unimaginable horrors. And it is here that we move to the timeline of Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris, the Toolbox Killers. October 15th, 1978. After serving just under 4 years of his 5-year sentence, Lawrence Bittaker was released from prison.
Mental.
Yeah, attempted murder, but off you go. Priors, don't worry, go get out of here, you scamp.
Be free.
He soon returned to the Los Angeles area, where he found work as a skilled machinist, earning close to $1,000 a week, which for 1978, guys, you probably guess, was a huge amount of money, between $7.5 to $8.5 grand a week.
Ooh, jeez Louise.
Very skilled machinist. That's mental money.
What's that a year, Ben?
Oh, yeah, go on, Ben.
Let's go with 8.5. My loud keyboard.
Times 52.
102 grand a year. No, so that's sorry. That's 3 months. How many weeks? 52.
52.
There we go. Carry the 442 grand a year.
That's a lot, mate.
$500,000 almost a year.
Getting a lot of matchmakers for that.
So go, matchmakers, buy a nice house, settle down, enjoy your life, be good to charity, be good to your friends and loved ones. The end. Yeah?
Yeah.
I wish Lawrence saw it that way.
What's down, like, a dream motorbike? What's the most expensive one? Like, as in, like, if you had unlimited money?
You can max them out like 30, 40, 50 grand.
Is it? 50 grand is like absolute... Okay.
Is there like a Bugatti in the motorbike world?
Good question, actually. But, yeah, I don't know what the top dog is, if you mean speed and power.
Price.
Just Google top dog motorcycle and it's
top dog.
Just not come up with anything, unsurprisingly.
Yeah, I mean, especially for he hasn't got a glowing CV. He's just come out of prison. He's obviously a highly intelligent man, can make a good impression, but straight into a $8.5 grand a week job.
Like I said, it feels like a time in his life where it could be a factory reset. It could be like, okay, let's put that behind me. Let's reset now. I can live my life comfortably, very comfortably, and move on. But no. Any
update on the bike, Tom? Did you Google it?
Oh, to be honest, I just found loads of leather jackets come up. I put luxury motorcycle. I'm not a machine guy.
The most expensive motorcycle currently is worth $11 million. It's called the Nyman Marcus Limited Edition Fighter.
Does it look cool?
It looks quite cool. We'll get it up on screen.
Where would you park that? Then surely you wouldn't park it in a supermarket.
But you can get some Harley Davidsons, road glides for 110 grand. I think you can get whatever you want nowadays, can't you? Customize it to high heaven. Well,
Lawrence, although he landed on his feet, he would only need a small amount of this huge income to start putting his awful plans into action. Although he described himself as a loner, those who encountered him in his neighborhood often saw something very, very different. He developed a reputation as a helpful and incredibly generous individual, occasionally donating money to the Salvation Army, and on one occasion, purchasing large quantities of fast food and wine, which he started distributing amongst the homeless individuals in downtown LA. There you go. He's doing his bit there. This corner could have been turned.
Maybe not giving wine to the homeless community, but I think, I'm surprised to hear that he was donating to Salvation Army. And
here's where it starts to get a bit seedy and strange.
But do you think deep down he's doing all this good stuff to maybe think, I can go back into the darkness? It kind of balances out.
Blend in a bit more, yeah. Well,
like a snidey Bruce Wayne, in a way.
Yeah, in a way.
Well, yeah, here is where it starts to get a little bit strange. Among local teenagers, he was particularly popular. Lawrence later admitted the reason for this popularity was simple. His Burbank motel room was almost always stocked with beer and marijuana, ensuring it remained a place where young people were eager to gather. And he would enjoy being in their company. Just 3 months later, Roy Norris was also released from prison. He initially reunited with his mother and started living under her roof. However, just a month after his release, he abducted and raped a hitchhiker before abandoning her in the desert. After this incident, he did not return to his mother's home and instead met up with Lawrence at his motel, where they resumed the planning phase of their awful plans. In order to carry out these plans, Lawrence decided that the pair would need something more practical than just a car. With financial assistance from Roy, he purchased a silver grey 1977 GMC Vandura in February of 1979. We'll pop a picture up here for you. It was a van with no windows on one side and a large sliding passenger door on the other. It was large enough to conceal passengers, large enough to transport tools, and large enough to ensure that whatever happened inside could remain hidden from the outside world. Yeah, and so this is where the whole toolbox killers thing comes from, and what they would fit this van with, and various literal toolboxes that would be in the van as well. Lawrence later admitted that when he first examined the vehicle, he quickly realized how easily he or Roy could pull up alongside a young girl and drag her inside without even needing to fully open the door. Which is a terrifying thought. The two men soon gave the vehicle a name that reflected its intended purpose, Murder Mac. So yeah, they've reunited, they're taking their planning very, very seriously. They've now purchased this van and started to convert it, obviously with the one of them being a skilled machinist, very easily able to implement all these devices and basically make it as easy as possible for them to pull up alongside, pull someone off the road and carry on without drawing any attention to themselves. It just now escalates beyond anything you could imagine from this point onwards. And the other horrifying thought, I think it was one of the titles for the episode, is the torture chamber on wheels. I know this case gets compared a lot to the David Parker Ray toy box killer case, and that was obviously static and he kept it in the back of his garden, but the fact that they could move very quickly to different parts of the country, and there's an extra element here where they decide on a specific location to take the van, which is fucking horrifying. They can essentially come and go as they please, and it's a horrifying circumstance, this particular situation. So once the vehicle was ready, Roy and Lawrence began preparing the tools that they believed they would need. These were not weapons designed simply to kill. They were tools designed to inflict pain. Pliers, screwdrivers, ice picks, hammers, vice grips, lengths of wire, rope, tape, items commonly found anywhere in a household toolbox. They were repurposed for something far darker. The collection of tools quickly grew, filling the van with objects that could restrain, injure, and torment. To complete the build, they installed a bed. This detail would later give investigators, and eventually the media, the name that would follow the pair forever: the Toolbox Killers. In the 5 months between February and June of 1979, using the Murder Mac, as they called it, Roy and Lawrence picked up more than 20 young female hitchhikers in the Southern California area. None of these girls were ever assaulted, at least not yet. Instead, these encounters served as morbid practice runs, allowing the pair to refine their methods for persuading young women to voluntarily enter the van, whilst also searching for locations where they could operate without any possible interruption or eyewitnesses. So this phase, they would try and market the van as obviously a classic kind of camper, and they would often say, we've got beer, we've got food, we've got weed, do you want to get in? And this period here, they're basically practicing what communication method will get them in easiest without any force, and that is a terrifying thought.
Even though it's not the same at all, and maybe it's just because you said the word camper, but Ed Kemper, he used to wear the glasses and he did look more innocent, and it's the level of thought about practice runs. The amount of times we cover cases where it's a rash decision, rush into it, not prepared whatsoever. With this, yeah, it feels like it's all so thought out. Obviously, I imagine that's more Lawrence than Roy.
Agreed.
But it's methodical, isn't it? It's thinking, okay, how can we make sure that we're not going to get caught? What details do we need to include? And the thought being practice runs. Imagine being a girl that was picked up in the practice run and then hearing about them years later and how close you were to meeting your fate. It's horrific.
Well, through this, calling it trial runs makes me so uncomfortable anyway, but through these trial runs, they basically made the decision that Lawrence would be the one driving because he looked less threatening. Little man, not as scary looking as Roy, and Roy would then be in the back place of the van. And also to have someone like Roy, who has committed loads of very impulsive, horrible crimes, I'm guessing Lawrence had to tell him, you're not doing anything to any of these people. This is, these 20 young girls got in and out of the van without being harmed, supposedly. I bet he had to obviously order Roy not to do anything once they had them inside.
Yeah, literally, it's... You said Lenny and George earlier from Mice and Men. I'm thinking Pinky in the Brain, but if Pinky was a bit more menacing.
Just wants to take over the world.
Yeah.
Little by little.
No Gallagher.
So yeah, this is now, they find this particular location. I was not aware that these type of roads even existed. I mean, it makes perfect sense, but this just adds another horrifying detail. In late April, they discovered what they believed to be the perfect place to take the van. And this was an isolated fire break high up in the San Gabriel Mountains. And a fire break is a narrow, rarely used dirt track typically built for emergency access by firefighters only. So these would often be overgrown up in the mountains. No one would go there, and often they would be gated off as well, so that no regular traffic could go through there. The location offered privacy, distance from the city, and long, remote stretches where no one would be likely to pass. Recognizing its potential immediately, Lawrence forced open the locked gate at the entrance with a crowbar and then replaced it with a padlock of his own, effectively claiming the road as their own private hunting ground. And that is exactly what it would soon become.
Even the replacing the lock of your own is so calculated, isn't it? Because you just think that's going to buy you so much time anyway if people are driving up there. Yeah, I've seen on documentaries this road. It's so isolated and it's so remote. Like, genuinely a place where no one's going to hear you scream, essentially. It's terrifying.
June 24th, 1979. During the late evening, the pair began actively searching for their first victim. They drove slowly through the San Fernando Valley, circling areas where young women were known to hitchhike. Hours passed before they finally encountered 16-year-old Lucinda Lynn Schaefer, who went by Cindy, standing beside the road after attending a church gathering. Lucinda was on her way to her grandmother's house, and the two men offered her a ride that would supposedly get her there before dark. Lucinda refused the offer. After failing to lure her with alternative offers of marijuana and wine, they drove a little further, parking alongside a quiet driveway. Roy stepped out of the van, opened the passenger side sliding door, and leaned in, his head and shoulders hidden behind the panel. When Lucinda tried to pass the van, he exchanged a few words with her before forcibly dragging her inside and closing the door. With no witnesses, Lucinda was now bound in the movable prison that Roy and Lawrence had prepared for this exact moment. Using a method they would repeat in most of the later murders, Lawrence turned the radio to full volume, while Roy bound her arms and legs and gagged her with duct tape. Then, with calculated precision, they drove her to the isolated firebreak road in the San Gabriel Mountains. Once there, the pair took it in turns to repeatedly sexually assault the teenager, who bravely pleaded for time to pray if the pair had intentions to kill her. Roy then attempted to strangle her as she prayed, before he became overwhelmed by the look in her eyes. He then moved to the front of the van and began vomiting, whilst Lawrence moved to restrain her, placed a wire coat hanger around her neck, and started twisting it with a pair of vice grip pliers until she stopped moving. After that, the pair wrapped her in a plastic shower curtain and threw her body into a canyon. Jesus Christ. Lawrence would write the following hauntingly analytical recollection of the events of their first murder.
The girl displayed a magnificent state of self-control and composed acceptance of the conditions of which she had no control. She shed no tears, offered no resistance, and expressed no great concern for her safety. I guess she knew what was coming.
What happens next remains largely unknown. Lucinda never returned home, and her body was never recovered. For months, her disappearance remained a mystery. Another missing teenager in a city already accustomed to transient populations and runaway reports. At the time, there was no clear evidence connecting her disappearance to either Roy Norris or Lawrence Bittaker, but investigators would later come to believe she had been their first victim. From here, Roy is believed to have nicknamed Lawrence Pliers.
Yeah.
Absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it really is. This is at a time, obviously the 70s, we've covered so many cases where different serial killers were active across specifically different parts of California at the time. So this was, although this, I wanted to say this is kind of not really a stranger danger. People would willingly hitchhike and get in vans and cars of other people all over the country. But this was also a time where there were lots of active serial killers in the area, and young girls would be much more hesitant to get into vehicles such as this, especially late at night. And that's why their backup plan, if they wouldn't take Lawrence, as unthreatening, offering them a ride, the backup plan was Roy opening the sliding door and just grabbing them. And this is the first murder, which is absolutely harrowing. It will escalate so much.
And also just like Roy going through immediate doubt and remorse. I mean, it's meaningless now because knowing what they do. And I guess that's why they're in like a team sort of dynamic. Lawrence taking over while Roy vomits, but I find that really interesting.
And that's strange in itself, because obviously, as we've gone through, Roy was the one doing the crime similar to this, not as obviously drastic as this in early life. So why is he having this repulsion against it compared to Lawrence? And Lawrence, was doing, as we said, a bit more kind of manipulative crimes and assaults. But one heartbreaking thing I found is she asked him if she could pray. Essentially, she knows she was coming, and they refused her that opportunity. Like, just that extra callous nature of it, and her, her knowing her fate is heartbreaking enough. And then again, even the way that they kill her is horrific. It's so like an animal, like treated her like an animal, and and it's just such an innocent girl leaving church to go to her grandma's house. It's, can you paint a more innocent kind of story there? Yeah, truly heartbreaking.
This is why this case absolutely it terrifies me, is that they've got essentially a mobile murder home that they can move anywhere at any time. They've also then got this added element of the fire trap road where they have their own custom locks. They can move it. It doesn't look conspicuous from the outside, just like any other camper in the area. They can also modify it to literally look like a camper. It's got a bed in the back, tools. Why have you got these tools? Well, I'm a machinist, I carry it for work, whatever. They've got the perfect alibi. They've then got alternate, little Lawrence. They've got like a little, not very intimidating looking Lawrence driving the car, and they've got Roy in the back. It's just, they've thought about this so much. And it did shock me that Roy was the one to vomit and have that repulsive reaction. But what made me even more scared was that Lawrence was so quickly like, oh, I'll do it. And he was fine. And he'd never done anything like that before.
Yeah.
You bought a van once, didn't you, Ben?
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it the whole time.
Have you really?
What happened to that?
I sold it.
Oh,
yeah. I wish I could have. I got done with the camper, basically. I lost a couple of grand on it. It was a lovely camper. But it had a lot of issues with the engine that would be on repair. And the guy that I sold it to knew about that, I was honest. Newmarket Races, he parks it up there and lives in that. He does something with the horses there. It sounds dodgy, doesn't it? But he just uses it as a mobile home there. It's a cool interior, but unfortunately the engine was fucked. But nothing to do with different times. Wasn't even born yet.
So we move on to July 8th, 1979. So just 2 weeks later, the pair struck again. This time, they encountered 18-year-old Andrea Joy Hall, who was hitchhiking along the Pacific Coast Highway. Upon seeing her, the duo apparently became instantly convinced that she would become their second victim. However, as they slowed the van down to offer her a ride, another motorist pulled over in front of them and offered Andrea a legitimate lift. Strangely not deterred by this, the pair decided to pursue the vehicle several miles to Redondo Beach. They parked up not far from the vehicle, dropping her off. Roy hid in the rear of the van, whilst Lawrence called out to her and offered her a cold drink from his cooler to take to the beach. As Andrea approached, Roy leapt out from the rear of the vehicle and gradually managed to overpower her, twisting her arm behind her back and forcing her into the van as she screamed in agony. Here, he gagged her and bound her wrists and ankles with electrical tape. Once inside the van, the pattern that would define the killings began to take shape. They then drove her to the same location in the San Gabriel Mountains, where they had so callously ended the life of Lucinda Schaefer. Once there, they took it in turns to repeatedly rape Andrea. Towards the latter stages of the despicable ordeal, they noticed car headlights approaching from a distance. Lawrence immediately placed his hand over Andrea's mouth and pulled her into a row of bushes, whilst Roy attempted to drive towards the vehicle. The vehicle vanished, and so Roy returned. The pair then armed themselves with knives and hammers and forced Andrea to walk naked up the mountain range whilst posing for a number of Polaroid photos and being forced to perform oral sex on the two men. She begged for her life on numerous occasions. but they ignored her pleas. When she started to scream, the men encouraged her not to stop. Several minutes later, Lawrence asked Andrea to give him as many reasons as she could as to why they should spare her life. As she began to panic, he approached her and forced an ice pick into her left ear through her brain. He then rotated her body and stabbed another ice pick into her other ear. He then stomped on each side of her head until the handles broke from the ice picks. Jesus Christ. She was killed immediately, but Lawrence decided to strangle her as well. Just like Lucinda, her body was then thrown from a cliff edge into a canyon and never found. Her sudden disappearance remained unsolved for several weeks, with her mother later recalling,
I can't sleep. I now have 2 8-hour jobs and I work as many days and nights a week as I am able to. I don't want to sleep, because if I go to sleep, then I have nightmares about how my daughter was murdered.
So there's escalation here from Lucinda, picking her up in the evening when it's getting dark, to now following a car in broad daylight and abducting someone. Obviously, as I said, they've practiced this, but it seems to be, they seem to already feel invincible and seem to feel like they're not going to be caught. I mean, it just to me feels like it's already escalating at an alarming rate, and even just the violence of the murder, like we said, with the first murder of Lucinda, treating her like an animal with that, but then the brutality of the pickaxes, and then even after she's clearly passed, still continuing with the assault. It's
like you said, Tom, it's the insistent nature. It's not even that they were deterred by the other vehicle coming along and giving Andrea a lift. It's like that's their target then and there. No bones about it. We're going to follow her. And I also think how we read about almost giving her a chance to give them reasons why they should spare her makes me think if that was a genuine thing, or again, is this a power play just to hear her in pain and pleading?
Yeah.
Another power trip, perhaps. It's just awful.
Yeah, I think Roy was saying in prison, wasn't he, that he found his sexual gratification was women in pain or women struggling. I think that's exactly what that is, isn't it? He's the all power in that situation, and they're directly asking him whether they live or die, essentially. And I think that they have absolutely no intention of freeing them.
They're in such an isolated, remote location as well. That part that Dan said about when she started screaming, they actually encouraged it and said, "Scream for me." And this is why it became known as the kind of the "Scream for Me" murders. They're in such an isolated, remote location, and they're getting off over the fact that she's screaming and begging for her life that they're now trying to get her to scream louder and louder. There's so much horror movie elements to this. There was, in the later trial, they'll kind of turn on each other eventually, and this part of seeing the headlights in the distance, apparently Roy drove towards them, but then also was asked to drive off and get some more alcohol. And his argument would be that he drove off to get the alcohol, returned, and by this point Lawrence had done the ice pick thing in both ears. They would kind of turn on each other that way and try and blame one another for the first few killings.
I had another account as well where Roy was saying that he didn't want to be there all night like they were with the first man with Lucinda because he was too tired for work. So he actually wanted to get back earlier, which is as if it's an inconvenience on him committing these acts, which obviously they didn't need to commit in any way, shape or form. And he was okay, well, if you're going back, if you need to go back, then I'll stay here and I'll call you when I'm done. That kind of nature of it, which obviously, do you believe two killers and what they're saying and the reasons for what they did and the actions of the night, and they were obviously trying to cover their backs as well with the stories. There's conflicting information out there, but it's just a sheer disrespect of even with the bodies, throw it off the edge of a cliff as if it's just an empty beer bottle. I completely understand the mum's point of view there, not wanting to have any time to dwell on the situation. But yeah, truly heartbreaking that.
It is because they would use the van as a natural camper as well. So although we've used these specific dates of abduction, we're not convinced for sure how long they were there. Because with other victims, they would spend multiple nights on this fire trap and no one would drive past. so they could just stay there and torture people for days. And as you said, Roy then saying, I'm tired, I've got to go to work, as if it's an inconvenience to him. Yeah, it's appalling. It's really appalling.
September 3rd, 1979. By early September, the pair had grown even more confident and seemingly more wicked. In broad daylight, they spotted 15-year-old Jackie Doris Gillum and 13-year-old Jacqueline Leah Lamp sitting on a bus stop bench near Hermosa Beach. The girls had been travelling along the Pacific Coast Highway when the van slowly pulled up beside them, and the two men inside offered them a ride. Unfortunately, Jackie and Jacqueline accepted. Climbing into the vehicle were two strangers more than twice their age, 31-year-old Roy and 38-year-old Lawrence. Once inside the van, Roy offered the girls joints, which they nervously accepted and began to smoke. But, almost immediately, something felt wrong. The van was no longer heading towards the coast. Instead, Lawrence had turned inland and was heading towards the San Gabriel Mountains. When the girls began to protest, their concerns were met with calm, hollow excuses and laughter, the words that did nothing to mask the danger slowly closing in around them. Jacqueline, the younger of the two, realised what was happening first and lunged for the sliding door. But before she could escape, Roy struck her on the back of the head with a bag filled with large lead weights, briefly knocking her unconscious. He then immediately turned his attention to Jackie, overpowering her and beginning to gag her and bind her hands. Moments later, Jacqueline regained consciousness and, once again, she tried to flee the van. But Roy twisted her arm behind her back and dragged her back inside. As the struggle continued in full view of the other motorists on the road, Lawrence abruptly pulled the van to a stop, punched Jackie in the face, and helped Roy finish restraining both terrified girls. So again, another escalation there, broad daylight, in front of other motorists, assaulting the women, the children. It's so brazen. It's mad. The two young girls were then driven deep into San Gabriel Mountains, where they were held captive for almost 2 days. Bound and gagged inside the van, Jackie and Jacqueline were subjected to repeated acts of sexual and physical abuse, while the two men kept them under constant control. Roy and Lawrence even slept inside the vehicle alongside their captives, taking turns acting as lookouts while the other rested, ensuring that neither terrified girl had the opportunity to escape. Disturbingly, Lawrence asked Roy to take numerous Polaroid photos of him with both the girls during various instances of sexual assault. He also asked Roy to take Polaroids of himself with each girl, fully clothed, smiling towards the camera, as if they were some kind of couple or acquaintance. As would become part of their morbid routine, and ultimately part of their downfall, the pair made numerous audio tape recordings whilst raping and torturing the girls. And Lawrence even forced the girls to pretend to be their cousins on tape. And after all this had taken place, Lawrence then stabbed 15-year-old Jackie repeatedly in the chest with an ice pick and tore off part of one of her nipples using a pair of pliers. After almost 48 hours in the mountains, Lawrence and Roy allegedly started arguing about how and why they should murder their captives. Roy apparently suggested to Lawrence that Jackie should be killed quickly because she had been far more cooperative than Jacqueline, with Lawrence bluntly dismissing that possibility by saying, "No, they only die once anyway." Jackie was stabbed in the ear with an ice pick before being strangled to death. Jacqueline, who had been forced to watch the ordeal, was then held down by the throat and struck repeatedly over the head with a sledgehammer before being strangled and bludgeoned to death as she convulsed. Their bodies were then thrown into a nearby shrubland canyon.
Yeah, so this is, it's just highly, highly disturbing. The fact that they've also decided to take two young girls, again, as Tom said, there's significant escalations here, but they stayed with them for 48 hours in the mountains. And because one of them was slightly more cooperative, they've decided, well, he argued that should be a reason why she deserves a quicker death. Is just...
as some form of prize.
Yeah. As if they've suddenly found their morals, which are very warped morals at that.
And on Halloween, October 31st, 1979, several weeks later, the Toolbox Killers abducted their fifth and final victim. This encounter would become one of the most infamous, heartbreaking and horrifying moments in the entire case. Late in the evening, 16-year-old Shirley Lynette Ledford was standing outside a petrol station in the Sunland Tujunga area of Los Angeles, hitchhiking home after attending a Halloween party with friends. Investigators later speculated that she may have accepted a ride with Lawrence and Roy because she recognised Lawrence, who was known to frequent the McDonald's restaurant where she worked, part-time as a waitress. This seemingly ordinary interaction from someone she thought she knew would seal her fate. Once inside the van, Roy offered her marijuana, which she refused. Lawrence then drove toward a quiet, isolated street and brought the van to an abrupt stop. Once parked, Roy suddenly produced a knife and began binding and gagging the terrifying teenager with contraction tape. What followed was another prolonged period of escalating torture inside the van. But before that began, the pair pulled out a tape recorder and excitedly started recording. They wanted to document what they were about to do, not as evidence, not as proof, but as a trophy, and as a deranged piece of audio arousal that Lawrence would later use repeatedly. As the van doors locked, the tape recorder began capturing everything that followed. What investigators were later hear on that recording was almost impossible to comprehend: the sound of unrelenting torture. The voice of a young girl pleading, screaming for her life, and the calm, controlled voices of the two men responsible. After striking her in the face several times, Lawrence grabbed her by the face and asked her, "What's the matter? Don't you like to scream?" Shirley began to weep and pleaded with her captors not to touch her and to let her go. Sadly, they had far more sinister intentions in store.
This is the piece of audio that I referred to at the start of the episode. We're not going to play it in our episode. It is online and widely available, but I watched a documentary where they show footage of people in the courtroom fleeing the courtroom, and there's very faint audio of this tape in the background, and you can still faintly hear it. And I'm just like, I can't bring myself to play it. But this goes back to Lawrence when he got out of prison, making himself known in the area, giving out food and wine, giving drugs and beer to teenagers. Again, you think that might be some sort of weird networking on his part during that period of time, because this young lady thought that she recognized him, thought she could trust him, and now has been placed in this position. Roy started driving the van to different rural locations all over Southern California over the next hour and a half. Meanwhile, Lawrence pulled out a hammer and began ordering Shirley to scream as loud as she could. Anytime he was not satisfied, he struck her. So, not satisfied with her initial screams, he began striking her sexual organs with his fists and began pulling at different body parts with a pair of pliers. He then sodomized her in multiple manners with both the hammer and the pair of pliers before proceeding to sexually assault her as she pleaded for her life. Everything was recorded on the cassette. The van was eventually parked up in a remote location, and Roy and Lawrence swapped places. On the tape, Roy can be heard retrieving a sledgehammer from the toolbox, to which Shirley can be heard saying, "Oh no, I'll scream if you stop hitting me." Roy then struck her in the left elbow, shattering it instantly. As Shirley tried to inform her captors that her elbow was broken, Roy proceeded to strike her an additional 25 times with the sledgehammer in the very same location. She alternated between screaming and crying for her life, pleading with her captors to stop hitting her and to let her go. After a brief moment of silence, Roy then asked her, "What are you snivelling about?" The violence, the mayhem, the horror, it continued for the next 2 hours before Lawrence strangled Shirley to death with a wire coat hanger and a pair of pliers. Shirley's young life had been abruptly brought to the most terrifying of ends. Afterwards, Lawrence made a chilling decision. Instead of hiding the body or disposing of it in the mountains like their 4 previous victims, he chose to leave it somewhere it would be quickly discovered, hoping to watch the reaction unfold in the news. The pair drove through the California neighborhood of Sunland until they selected a random house where Roy placed Shirley's body in a bed of ivy on the front lawn. The following morning, a jogger passing the property made the devastating discovery. Stephen Kay, then LA County Deputy District Attorney and the lead prosecutor that would be eventually involved in the case, stated the following on this particular murder.
Lynette Ledford's murder was recorded on tape. It's the most god-awful thing that I've ever heard. Anybody who has heard the tape has had psychological problems because no Hollywood actress could imitate what you hear on that tape. It's like the tape reaches in and pulls your insides out. The screams are just ungodly.
So, harrowingly, This audio tape would go on for hours. There's a minute or so of it that's somehow been extracted and placed on YouTube. This audio, there's two elements to this audio tape that would be particularly, one, upsetting, and two, very, very disturbing. It would be used and played to the family for the mother to eventually identify Lynette. And number two, Lawrence Bittaker would keep the cassette, play it in the vehicle to himself and masturbate to it. And yeah, it's, as you just heard there from Stephen K, this audio would cause psychological problems to anyone many people that listen to it. So Roy, one of the men responsible for the murder and for the audio recording of her torture, would later make a similar observation about the recording. He said the following:
"We've all heard women scream in horror films. Still, we know that no one is really screaming. Why? Simply because an actress can't produce some sounds that convince us that something vile and heinous is happening. If you ever heard that tape, there's just no possible way that you'd not begin crying and trembling. I doubt you could listen to more than a full 60 seconds of it."
So weeks passed, and though the discovery of Shirley's body made big news and created a great deal of fear in the local neighborhood, the case remained unsolved. However, by November of 1979, things slowly began to unravel. Roy started talking. So, after reconnecting with a former prison acquaintance named Joseph Jackson, Roy began bragging about what he and Lawrence had been doing for the past few months, describing the murders in disturbing detail, explaining the audio recordings, and even mentioning 3 girls who had bravely managed to escape them. Alarmed by this, Joseph Jackson then made the decision to speak with his attorney, who urged him to go to the police. And that is exactly what he did. Detectives quickly realized that Roy's confessions did in fact line up with multiple missing women and girls cases in the area, and with a rape reported by a young woman who had been sprayed with mace and abducted by, quote, 2 men in a white Vandura van. Now, this young lady was a woman by the name of Robin Robeck, and she had reported months earlier this assault by 2 men in a white van, but it never went any further. When shown mugshots, she immediately identified both Roy Norris and Lawrence Bittaker as her attackers, and the net was now closing in. So from this, police placed Roy Norris under surveillance, and within days they had their opportunity to arrest him. On November 20th of 1979, Roy was arrested for violating parole. Later that same day, Lawrence Bittaker was taken into custody at his motel. Once investigators began searching their homes and the van, the evidence was staggering and incredibly disturbing. Graphic Polaroid photos of multiple missing persons, jewelry taken as souvenirs, a jar of Vaseline, hundreds of photographs of young girls secretly taken along Southern California beaches, a sledgehammer covered in blood traces, and a book detailing how to locate police radio frequencies. As well as this, they found a single cassette tape. On it was the voice of 16-year-old Shirley Ledford screaming and begging for mercy while 2 men laughed and mocked her during the final moments of her life. Faced with growing evidence, Roy eventually confessed, and he told investigators how he and Lawrence had spent months driving the Pacific Coast Highway, luring teenage girls into their van before taking them into the San Gabriel Mountains where they were assaulted and murdered. In exchange for avoiding the death penalty, Roy also agreed to testify against Lawrence, and he claimed that Lawrence became increasingly more unstable and increasingly more monstrous with each murder. Roy also took detectives to the San Gabriel Mountains to look for remains. Almost no remains were found, with the exception of bones from Jackie Gilliman and Leah Lamp. And yet, hauntingly, an ice pick was still stuck in Jackie's skull. At trial, a 17-minute section from the recording of Shirley Ledford's torture was played in court, leaving jurors and spectators in tears, with numerous people running from the room. Apparently, Lawrence Bittaker smiled for the duration that it was played. 2 years later, in 1981, Lawrence was sentenced to death, whilst Roy received 45 years to life for his role in the 5 murders. Neither man would ever be released. Lawrence Bittaker died on death row in 2019, aged 79, and Roy Norris died just 3 months later, aged 72, bringing a quiet end to one of the most brutal murder cases in California history.
As we said, obviously, every case in this series is a dark case. And yeah, that one, the brutality, the fact there's 2 people, for some reason also makes it seem so much darker. The dark secret they shared with one another. That cassette tape, and yeah, just some elements of this case. It's amazing how many cases we've covered, and there's still things that surprise you and you've never heard kind of uttered. Yeah, a really, really heartbreaking case. The only slight thing you can look at this and be happy about is the fact that they got so brazen and then they were found, because this could have went on for a long time. And even Joseph Jackson, actively going to the police with it as well, because, he could have easily joined in, or he could have, just ignored it and thought, I'm not getting involved in that. But luckily he did, and it stopped this reign of terror, because, some truly horrible things.
Yeah, there's lots of, I think there's just, I've said it earlier, the idea that they could move anywhere they wanted, and to this specific area, which they seem to claim, that fire road, didn't they? They seem to claim it as their own hunting ground. I can understand why this case is referred to as one of the most disturbing ones in Californian history. It's the first time I've been scared of a case, which just seems like a weird word to use, I guess, with what we do. I knew it was going to be bad going into it, and it was worse than what I thought it would be going into it as well. 2 absolute pieces of shit, to say the least, actually.
Yeah, I think definitely worth having a little bit of decompression time here with our decompression session. Yes, guys, if you want to get involved, send us an email at hello@icmap.co.uk with a question, an agony aunt question. Make sure it's light, or it can be something that can be debated, but it's something that's a bit lighthearted that we can have a good chat about. A little bit of time where we can cleanse the palate at the end of the episode, have a little bit of... Because it's been very hard to find any light moments in these cases, and I know a lot of people do say they benefit from it when we can have a little bit of fun here and there, but as you can understand, this has been very hard to do. We've got 2 questions. One's a bit of a debative question, guys, and the other one is more of a kind of a classic question. What do you want to start with? Do you want to start with debate or classic?
Classic could be quite nice to warm up with, and then
let's do a
I don't know
classic,
if Dan, you had the opposite in mind. I don't want
No,
to
let's do classic, boy, and then have a good old debate after that.
There you
Mass
go.
debate.
So this comes in from Paul. He says, "Good afternoon, gentlemen. It's a little cliche, but nonetheless, I'd really love to know which celebrities, dead or alive, would you all invite to a dinner party or for a beer? Love the pod, listen to almost every episode and can't wait for the rest of the season. All the best, Paul." Thank you, Paul. It's a classic question for a reason, Paul, so don't say it's a cliche. It's absolutely fine, and I'd be interested to know what the boys who they would have. Should we do it? So we're having a dinner party between us, guys, and we have 2 guests each, and we have to agree on them to make it slightly more... Or just 2 guests each, and we're having a dinner party. But you have to consider the other people's guests.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I quite like that.
Any spring to mind immediately for your review?
I think Tommy Cooper would be he'd be in the running for me. He'd be a fun dinner guest. I don't think he'd offend anyone, and he'd just be able to do tricks at the table.
I mean, he did have a problem with the booze and get a bit...
Yeah. Just at the end of it, we'll just have a couple at the dinner table.
Yeah, that's fine. Get Tommy Cooper. I think that's immediately a striking dinner guest as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Dan, anyone to sit next to Tommy Cooper? Have you got anyone?
Don't like that. Study like that.
Oh, I don't know. Immediately I thought of Attenborough, actually, because he's just a living legend. But not sure how he would get on with Cooper. But actually, probably quite fun.
Similar age.
Yeah.
I do think
99. He's 100 in a few weeks. Dan, could be a birthday party.
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
100. Bless him.
dead or alive. As well, I'm going down the dead variety. Freddie Mercury, because that would be interesting. Him and Tommy Cooper in Edinburgh. What the fuck would they talk about? But it'd be interesting to see. It'd be a lot. I bet Freddie has a lot of like very interesting stories to tell of the rock scene and the parties he was going to in those days.
He always comes across quite charming in interviews, very well spoken. 5 years apart, Attenborough and Cooper as well, so I feel like they have some relatability.
So Paul, as our dinner guest, we'd have Tommy Cooper, Freddie Mercury, and David Attenborough. Whoosh.
Boys.
There you go. And for the debate, saw this. It was quite a while ago. Actually, got this message over on our group on Facebook. So if you're not part of it, join the group. Lots of great posts in there. And this one really did spike conversation in the group. It was essentially about tattoos. All of us have tattoos. Essentially, Kaja, sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly there. Kaja basically asking, what are our thoughts about people getting serial killer tattoos? This person's got a leg sleeve essentially of different serial killers. You've got Albert Fisher's on there, the Bittaker killer, Eileen, Ed Kemper, Mara Hindley, Nanny Doss. Yeah, absolute array of killers. What's your thoughts on that? People can be into true crime.
I would be interested to see what the reason is for that. Like, why? But it does, I don't know, there's something about immortalising serial killers in artistic form on your body is a little bit strange for me.
I 100% agree. I mean, like, we obviously have talked, we sell merch, we do this, we do podcasts, we do lots of social posts or this stuff, and we've done quotes about serial killers and things like that. But we've mentioned before about these are some ideas for merch and stuff, but when it's ever come to the idea of the thought of having a serial killer involved in the merchandise, we've gone, that just feels wrong and incorrect. And the idea of having, like, I've got a portrait on my arm of Tom Petty, but that's because it's someone that I love his music, I love his stuff, I love his, a fan.
Well, yeah, because you would glorify Tom Petty because, like you said, you're a big fan of his work and his art. And I get the discussion point there that, some people would say, oh, well, you're monetizing true crime. Maybe not that voice, but
definitely
I get
voice,
that.
yeah. Definitely that voice.
But I would say we're not glorifying anything. We are relaying the facts of what happened. But I feel like the example you just shared, Tom, is a bit, I don't know, for me that crosses a line a little bit.
I completely 100% agree. We won't get Ben's opinion. But,
well, come on. I don't know why he's shying away. This suggests that he's got another opinion. Look at him.
Yeah, I completely agree, Dan. I think once you get it tattooed on your body, and there's people that committed, like, that leg will have people way over, like, hundreds of murders have happened. And you think if you were a family member and you see a tattoo of that person who killed your family member on someone's body, I think, yeah. Ben, what's your thoughts? Getting tattoos of true crime, serial killers, what's your immediate reaction to that?
Yeah, when I saw it at the time, when I've seen it just now, it made me feel icky. I got the ick, hard ick. I don't get it. I don't understand the thought process behind it. I also possibly, I don't know if this is going too strong, I think the tattooist could have said no to doing that as well.
I think that's the debate, is like, if you're a tattooist and someone comes in and asks for it, I think you can 100% say no. I mean, there might be some tattoo studios which don't look kindly on that. If there's a whole leg sleeve, there's a lot of money that's going to be spent on that tattoo. But I think morally, there's a lot of tattooists who have said no to things, neo-Nazi kind of things like that, which is a moral decision, which I think obviously is the right decision. But yeah, you're completely right. That's a whole different angle of it. If you're a tattooist, should you be saying yes to that? And yeah, I would say no. But guys, let us know in the comments below. We always love to hear what you have to say. If two questions there, I guess, is with the tattoo, is that wrong to do? And also, would that be a good dinner party? Let us know. But yeah, guys, do you have any lookalikes for this week's episode as well? Because I think this is the first one in a while we've actually got some candidates for some good lookalikes.
I'll just do mine first because I'm not confident in it at all, really. Yeah, so my one is Roy Norris, and for me, he's got a little bit of Jude Law in him. But I think that's a particular angle. Like, you look at other photos and you can't really see that.
I can kind of see that. I think, yeah, I know what you mean. You squint your eyes there.
Yeah.
I've got for Roy Norris, I've got David Cross a little bit.
I'll put in the file for people to see.
Have you used David Cross before? Has one of us used
Probably.
David Cross before? I feel like he's...
I'm sure I probably have. And
He has popped up.
for Lawrence, I've got Jason Watkins, especially in that character he's doing there. Something about him there.
Ooh.
That's cool.
give him a
That's good.
Shout.
Give him a little tash.
Good shout.
In the lips, that one for me.
Oh, yeah.
Tightly pursed lips.
Moment on the lips.
Right, for Lawrence Bittaker, this is old Lawrence, Death Row Lawrence. I think I also used this for David Parker Ray, Toolbox Killer. William H. Macy. Sorry, William. It's mainly the mustache and the eyes. Getting a lot of mixed reaction at the moment. It's mainly the mustache.
I don't think it's your best.
And then even worse, Roy Norris. This picture of Roy Norris, right, which Dan has gone kind of Jude Law. I do see that with the hairline as well. I definitely see like an ex-professional wrestler there, Tom. I didn't know if there was a bit of Val Venus or anything like that, but ultimately I've gone for Wilford Brimley. Again, mainly focusing on the glasses and the mustache rather than...
Who's Wilford Brimley?
He's in Yellowstone and done a couple of other things. Big things.
Big things.
Big things. Yeah.
Roy Norris in prison. He looks a little bit like old Mo Sislak.
Yeah?
But
Yeah.
I can see that.
Struggle with... I shouldn't have struggled because they've got lots of features, and I'm sure our comment section will do very well at them, but yeah. I'll give that to Tom and Dan this week.
Yes, guys, a very bleak episode, but thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to all the new subscribers, new listeners. We welcome you to the Cult of Vic Map, and we'll be back in next week with a brand new case. But until next time, like we always say,
Benjamin Carter's Cryptic
Clues.
oh fucking hell.
Yeah, I know. Oh,
Did you interject before I'm starting that?
Benjamin Carter's Cryptic Clues.
Oh, before we go, the cryptic clue for next week's episode is not my favourite Beatle. Not my favourite Beatle. Thank you so much. Sorry about that, Tom. Again, struggled this week.
Most people go to Ringo there, but
Let them. Fucking let them.
there you go. Let us know if you can figure that one out. Good luck. And yes, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back next week with a brand new case. And until then, like we always say,
We say this all the time.
keep doing what you're doing.
That's it.
Well, could I just jump in here, boys?
Yeah, please.
Unless it's not subscribing to ICMAP, because I just looked at our stats and 50% of you who are watching right now are not subscribed. That's crazy.
I wondered if they watched this far.
Yeah, they probably won't. I probably missed my chance.
But if you are,
and you haven't subscribed,
yeah.
please, it really helps us out.
It would mean the world to us.
And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, 5 stars, oh my goodness, we'd do things for that. We would do things for your 5-star review. So please think about leaving a 5-star review, and maybe I'll send you a nice sticker or a little holy sachet.
Sashi.
Sashi. Holy Sashi. All right, guys. I'll see you later then.
Bye-bye.
Take care of yourself. Do a bit.